Hi, Mijo and Mija. Have you ever rehearsed a conversation you want to have with your parents like 50 times in your head? And when you actually get in front of them, you don't say anything that you wanted to say? If you said yes, you're not the only one. Trust me. First gen kids have a deep love and sense of respect for their parents. But if there's one fact that we both know, is that communication can sometimes be difficult for us. The truth is, immigrant parents sacrifice a lot. There's cultural barriers and norms that clash between us and our parents. Emotions get complicated very quickly, and essentially, we're navigating two different worlds. Today, we're talking about something that's not commonly talked about, but that we all face difficulties with, and that's having difficult conversations with our parents. I narrowed it down to two different things on why I believe having difficult conversations with our parents is a difficulty per se. The first one, I think, is cultural differences. Many immigrant parents grew up in cultures where emotions weren't openly discussed. Questioning parents was disrespectful. You just had to do and believe what your parents did because that's the right. You don't question. But then also, for many of our parents, survival became the first thing that they thought of, not really feelings. So we grew up in this sense of therapy culture, social media, and people talking about their emotions and sharing their journeys with mental health and with therapy. That was normalized. But we also grew up with this sense of individuality and identity, something that our parents, most of our parents, didn't experience, whether that was when they first came to this country or early on in their origin countries. So both of us the first gen kids, and our parents, immigrant parents, we're both speaking different languages. And if you've ever tried to have a conversation with someone that doesn't speak your language or you don't speak their language, you can clearly see how there can be a barrier there, a communication barrier. We're experiencing that, but from an emotional perspective. And I want to talk about that today. One thing that I wrote down in my notes was it's not that our parents don't care, it's that they've learned a completely different way of communicating. The second thing that I was able to identify was the immigrant sacrifice dynamic. I think a lot of the time, us kids of immigrants feel like we owe our parents something. We often think to ourselves, after everything they did for us, like, how dare we question them? How dare we, be ungrateful for their sacrifices? But I feel like we sometimes feel guilty about making different life choices than the ones that our parents made. And a lot of the times that guilt comes from making a decision, making a decision that's for the better or for the best of our life. And it was unfortunately a decision that our parents didn't have that opportunity. Parents often just want three things for us. It's security, stability, and respect from their kids. And that's valid. I think the goal of difficult conversations, first and foremost, it's not about winning the argument or proving our parents wrong or even forcing them to understand life from our perspective. The goal of a difficult conversation is honesty, connection, and mutual respect. Sometimes it's not really about agreeing, but it's more so about understanding. So, how do we navigate these difficult conversations? And you're gonna see me look down at my notes here often, and it's really because I took the time to really pour so much from what I've learned in therapy and from what I've learned between the complex situation of having immigrant parents and being a first gen folk, the first thing that I was able to identify for being able to navigate these complexities is leading with vulnerability. And this is something that I learned in high school when I was in leadership. We were able to learn a lot of leadership traits, and vulnerability was a big one. I think it also comes down to, instead of saying, you don't understand me, saying, I want to share how I've been feeling, right? And I've talked about this mindset in a different episode. You're not attacking someone, you're more so sharing your feelings and you're validating your emotions. Picking the right moment is very, very important and crucial to having a difficult conversation. You don't want to do this at a family gathering. You don't want to do this during an argument. And you don't want to do this during a stressful situation. I think we all can gauge the appropriate moments to have deep, vulnerable conversations with our parents. And unfortunately, family gatherings or before a big event or anything along those lines, it's not the appropriate time to have these conversations. We can also gauge to see when the appropriate time is to have these conversations. It could be a car ride. I know a lot of times people spend time with their parents, and, in the car is a moment where you kind of like catch up as you're driving to your destination. I think another time is, one-on-one moment. If you still live at home and you have siblings, maybe if you're running an errand or you're doing a project with your parents, that's a great space to kind of like open that conversation. And then lastly, most definitely a calm environment. You want to make sure that tensions are at ease. You want to make sure that your parents are not in a stressful situation, being considerate of what else they may be going through, taking into account their work life, the family life. Like, if there's something stressful going on, you want to gauge to see when they are most at ease and less stressed so that they can be receptive and responsive to the conversation you're about to have, because it's going to be a difficult conversation. Acknowledging their perspective first I think it's important. Being able to say, I know you want what's best for me and you sacrificed a lot so I could have opportunities. Leading with that lowers their defense, and it's kind of reassuring and validating to them. Most of the times, the conversations that we want to have with our parents are difficult. It could be about various topics that, we have some examples to dive into today, but a lot of the times our parents understand that as, you're ungrateful, and after everything I did for you, the sacrifice, like, I think making that clear from the beginning, saying, I know you sacrificed so much and you did the best of your abilities and provided what you could, and I'm so grateful for that. It reassures them that you're not attacking that, right? Speaking from a experience and not accusation is another critical step to set you up for success. Instead of saying, you're always pressuring me and you always this, rephrase that and say, sometimes I feel pressure from you, or when you talk like this, it makes me feel this way. When you make these comments, it invalidates my feelings, my attempt, my courage, whatever that may be. Rephrasing it allows you to connect with your parents in that moment. And understanding that they may need time is very, very important as well. A lot of the times these conversations that we're going to have, they're about things that our parents may not know, may not be well versed in. So being patient with them, being understanding, and knowing that it's not going to be an overnight success is very important, not only for your parents, but for yourself, because you're the one that's going to take on this courageous conversation. Your parents might not understand it immediately. They might not react to the certain extent of emotion you're expecting them to react to. And sometimes you have to revisit the conversation at a later time. I've had to do that sometimes where I'm saying, okay, I don't think we're getting anywhere. We're running in circles. You're getting heated. I'm getting heated. Let's close this off and let's revisit this after we've had time to think to ourselves, after I've had time to go and speak to my therapist, to get more tools, to lead this conversation. Let's table this and come back at a later time. That's totally appropriate. I think growth takes multiple conversations, multiple scenarios, and multiple opportunities of coming together and being willing to learn and meet each other halfway. Because at the end of the day, you have to meet each other halfway. So now I want to go over a few scenarios that I picked for you guys on conversations and how I would personally lead these interactions with my parents. I think it's good to kind of put it into practice so that you guys can see a little bit of what I mean and where I'm coming from. I think the first scenario that I think is common within the first gen community is career expectations. Sometimes our parents don't want us to pursue the creative or the more non-traditional fields. And I think the expectation from immigrant parents is for us to go into very like common doctor, lawyer, teacher, those professions. They essentially want us to have like a stable job, and they know that doctors make a lot of money. They know that engineers make a lot of money. So for our parents, it's like, I want my kids to make a lot of money. So they're going to go to become a doctor, you know? They don't know that you have to go to med school. They used to have to go to regular school. So then it's like, but some of us do become doctors. Some of us do become lawyers. Some of us do become engineers, and that's amazing. But there's also a percentage of us who want to pursue something outside of that. I think an example of having this conversation is your parents would immediately be very defensive and say, absolutely not. You're not going to go to school to study graphic design. That's not a secure job. You're going to go get something secure. Why do you even want to do that? Do that as a hobby, right? Why would you choose that career? A good response is, I know stability is important to you because you worked hard for us. I've thought a lot about my future too, and this is something that I'm very passionate about. You're going to value your parents' security, but not necessarily the career title that they want us to embrace. Second scenario, moving away. A lot of our immigrant families are very close-knit and tight communities. We grow together, and it's just part of who we are, and it's part of our culture. An example of this conversation is your parents being defensive and saying, why do you want to move away from your family? Do we bother you? Do you not love us? Are we too much? Are you ashamed of us now that you've gotten a degree, now that you have a career? Is that what it is? Are you ashamed of where you come from, where you grew up? Those are common things our parents can say. Our response can be, I'm not leaving because I don't love being close to my family. I want to grow and experience new opportunities for myself. Frame it as growth and not rejection. Another scenario can be dating and relationships. It's very, very common for this topic to come up in traditional households for various reasons. Whether you are dating outside of the culture, which is a hot topic for most families, if your sexuality is a topic, that's also very big for immigrant families, or if you don't want to fall into the pressures of marrying early and, you know, the stereotypical norms that come with being a part of an immigrant family. An example of this conversation and how you would lead it is, I know relationships are important in our culture. I'm just trying to figure out what works best for me and my life. Scenario 4 is another common one in our community, and that's mental health. Some immigrant parents just don't understand what mental health is. Some of them are like, they don't believe in that. Sometimes parents will tell you, why do you need therapy? You don't need therapy. You're not crazy. Just pray. Leave it to God. Be strong. Don't cry. Men don't cry. Common things that come up in our cultures. A response to that is, talking to someone helps me process things better and become a healthier person. You're taking care of your mental health needs to show up stronger for yourself and for your family. Reframing it. When conversations don't go well, I think it's important to acknowledge the reality of it. Sometimes our parents are going to shut down. Sometimes they're going to be dismissive of our feelings. And sometimes we won't change their perspective. But that doesn't mean that our conversations were a failure or that our conversations weren't meant to happen. And it definitely does not mean that your feelings are not valid. Sometimes all it takes is for us to plant the seed and to keep watering it and watching it grow. And eventually, even a year, even a few months from now, you'll have that conversation and you'll say, wow, I would have never thought X months ago, X years ago, that we would be here having this conversation, or we would be here putting into practice things that stemmed from that difficult conversation. I think I experienced that myself when I went to therapy. I, of course, did therapy personally, and then I pitched therapy to my family to strengthen our bond as a family and to talk in a safe space about our emotions and to validate those feelings. Now that we're almost a year in that family therapy, we've grown so much stronger at understanding each other, understanding our cultural differences and how that goes into play with our everyday relationships. And we even stop sometimes and joke in therapy and say, oh my God, like, I can't believe we're talking about this. I would have never told my parents this like a year ago, or I would have never imagined that I would be having this conversation a year ago. So it's all about baby steps and growth. And I think the first gen bridge is very real. First gen kids are the bridge to a generation, right? We have our parents who are immigrants, us who are the first gen folks, and then our future families who are, we're the bridge to that. You know, that's our family that we get to form. In between our family and our parents is us, the first gen bridge. We translate language, culture, emotional communication. And what I like to say is our parents built the foundation and we're the bridge that we're building for our future kids to go on and, you know, carry on that generation. Overall, I think having difficult conversations with our parents isn't easy, but the fact is, if we care enough, we can care enough to try. That already says a lot about the love that we have for our family, the respect that we have for our parents, because having these difficult conversations is to grow more respect towards our parents, to understand where they're coming from, why it is that they think the way they think, understanding why they feel a certain way, and really just getting them to open up. And a lot of times we don't think it's possible, but you'll be surprised. If you don't try, you know, you'll never know. And I'm very much that person. And that's what happened for me. I was like, I'm just going to give it a try. I'm going to throw it out there because you really don't know until you try. So I encourage you now to start the conversation, to be patient, to water that seed, to take your time and just lead with compassion and lead with your heart and speak from the heart, because your parents will see that. And at the end of the day, your parents are willing to do whatever it takes for their children, for their child. So you asking this from them and you being consistent and you showing up and showing them that you deeply care about having these difficult conversations, and whether that be therapy or whether that be anything else, they'll do that as long as it makes you happy. And I think that's very important. Remember, talk from your heart, express your emotions, your feelings. This made me feel this way. I love you and I appreciate the sacrifices you've done for our family, but I want to be adventurous and I want to learn what this is going to take of me and what it's going to give me in return. So speaking for ourselves instead of attacking someone, or instead of saying, you always do this, or you never, or when you speak, you know, I feel this way when you talk about me in that manner. That's very important. So I think overall, the one thing that I've learned on having difficult conversations with my parents is, you know, our parents crossed these borders to give us a better life. And now we are going to teach them and educate them and show them the tools to have these conversations and to lead this new style of life that's refreshing and that's going to bring them nothing more but a bright future. Ah. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. I know it was a quicker episode. I really tried to be very intentional and try to write all the important things that I personally learned from therapy and from having these difficult conversations with my parents. I hope it was beneficial for you guys. I hope you guys learned something. I really wanted to stick to just the important meat of my advice instead of rambling to make this as beneficial for you as it is for me. But if you go on and lead these conversations, you got this. Believe in yourself. Sit yourself down. Rehearse that conversation and just talk from the heart. I'm so proud of you. You got this. DMs are always open if you want to chat. Until next time. Bye, guys.